Right this instant, explosive reports are emerging. A U.S. submarine has allegedly launched a torpedo strike on an Iranian warship. The vessel is said to be destroyed, but Iran has gone silent. What retaliation could be coming next? This is not a drill. This is not speculation from weeks ago. This is unfolding right now, April 15th, 2026, and multiple defense monitoring networks are lighting up with activity in one of the most dangerous waterways on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. According to early field intelligence and confidential informants embedded within regional naval operations, a U.S. Navy fast attack submarine operating under Central Command Authority may have executed a precision torpedo strike late last night, approximately 0240 local time, targeting what is believed to be an Iranian IRGC naval vessel. Now listen carefully because this next detail changes everything. Insider sources are indicating that the targeted vessel was not just any patrol ship. It was reportedly a command and control platform linked directly to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the IRGCN, responsible for coordinating swarm tactics and fast boat operations in the Gulf. If that is confirmed, this is not just a strike, this is a decapitation move. And here's where it gets even more serious. The United States has not officially confirmed the strike. The Pentagon has issued no statement. U.S. Central Command remains silent, but satellite tracking anomalies recorded between 0237 and 0244 show a sudden disappearance of a vessel transponder followed by what analysts are calling a thermal spike signature, consistent with an underwater explosion. I need you to understand how serious this is, because if a U.S. submarine did fire on an Iranian warship without public acknowledgement, that suggests rules of engagement have already shifted behind closed doors. That means we may already be in a phase of conflict that governments are not ready to admit publicly. Now let's talk about location. This allegedly happened just 38 nautical miles off the Iranian coast, near a heavily monitored corridor used by both commercial tankers and Iranian naval patrols. It's a region where tensions have been building for days. Ever since April 12th, when the U.S. began enforcing aggressive maritime restrictions tied to its blockade posture in the Strait, Iranian forces have been increasing their naval presence. Fast boats, surveillance drones, and anti-ship missile systems repositioned along the coastline, and then suddenly, this. A warship disappears, no distress signal, no official Iranian statement, no footage released, just silence. But wait, what happened next will shock you. Within hours of the reported strike, commercial satellite imagery providers detected unusual Iranian naval movements. 3 additional IRGC vessels were seen rapidly changing course, pulling back toward Bandar Abbas, Iran's primary naval hub. At the same time, U.S. reconnaissance aircraft, including at least one P-8 Poseidon, began circling the area in tight surveillance patterns. That's not routine. That's a response to something big. And here's another detail that's raising alarms inside military circles. Confidential informants are suggesting that the U.S. submarine involved may have been operating under a classified shadow tracking mission for over 72 hours prior to the incident. That means this wasn't a random encounter. This may have been planned, monitored, and executed with precision timings. So the question becomes, why now? Why would the United States risk such a direct and explosive action at this exact moment when tensions are already at a boiling point? Some insiders believe this could be tied to intelligence that the Iranian vessel was preparing for a coordinated strike of its own. Others suggest it may have been tracking or even targeting U.S. assets in the region. But here's the part no one is talking about publicly. If Iran confirms that one of its warships has been destroyed by a U.S. submarine, the pressure to retaliate will be overwhelming, not just politically, but militarily. And Iran does not respond quietly. Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you next could push this situation from a shadow conflict into a full-scale regional war. Because behind the scenes in the last 24 hours, something else has been happening, something even bigger, and it directly connects to this strike. And once you see the full picture, you'll realize this may have been just the opening move. To understand why this moment is so explosive, you have to step back just a few days, because this didn't start with a submarine strike. Fendor and this has been building quietly but aggressively into something far more dangerous. On April 12, 2026, U.S. Central Command initiated what officials described as a maritime security enforcement posture in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that might sound routine on the surface, but insider sources quickly clarified what it actually meant. And decider again cancer a de facto naval blockade targeting vessels suspected of carrying Iranian-linked oil shipments. Within hours, multiple tankers were rerouted, and at least 6 ships reportedly turned back under direct U.S. naval pressure. That alone was a major escalation. But Iran didn't stay passive. By April 13th, IRGC naval units had begun increasing patrol frequency along the southern coastline. Fast attack boats were deployed in groups of 5 to 8, a known swarm tactic designed to overwhelm larger warships. At the same time, drone surveillance activity spiked dramatically. U.S. pilots operating reconnaissance flights reported being painted by Iranian radar systems, meaning they were being actively tracked and potentially targeted. And this is where things start getting uncomfortable. Confidential informants within regional intelligence networks revealed that Iran had quietly repositioned several anti-ship missile batteries closer to the coast, systems capable of hitting targets up to 300 kilometers away. These weren't defensive moves. These were positioning steps for potential engagement. Now here's something most people missed. On April 14th, just hours before the alleged submarine strike, a classified briefing reportedly took place inside U.S. CENTCOM headquarters in Tampa, Florida. According to insider sources, this briefing included updated threat assessments indicating that an Iranian naval unit, possibly the same vessel that was later destroyed, had deviated from its patrol route and was operating in what analysts called a high-risk interception pattern. And in simple terms, it may have been preparing to intercept or challenge U.S. assets. I need you to understand how serious this is. Because in naval warfare, movement patterns are everything. A single deviation, just a few nautical miles off course, can signal intent. And if U.S. intelligence believed that Iranian forces were preparing for a hostile move, the rules of engagement could shift instantly. But wait, what I'm about to tell you next changes the entire timeline. At approximately 01:55 local time on April 15th, less than an hour before the reported torpedo strike, signals intelligence units picked up what's being described as encrypted burst transmissions coming from the Iranian vessel in question. These transmissions were short, rapid, and highly secure, the kind typically used to coordinate real-time operations. That's not routine communication. That's operational signaling. Now combine that with the fact that a U.S. submarine had reportedly been shadowing that vessel for over 72 hours, and suddenly this starts to look less like an accident and more like a trigger point. And here's where the fear really sets in. Because according to multiple confidential informants, U.S. commanders in the region had been granted expanded tactical authority just days earlier, meaning decisions to engage could be made faster with less delay from Washington. In a tense, high-risk environment like the Strait of Hormuz, that kind of authority can change everything in seconds. One wrong move, one misinterpreted signal, and suddenly you're not in a standoff anymore. You're in active combat. And that brings us back to the strike itself. If those encrypted transmissions were indeed linked to a potential Iranian operation, and if the U.S. submarine interpreted that as an imminent threat, then what happened at 0240 may have been a preemptive strike. But here's the part that should make you uneasy. There is still no official confirmation from either side, no statement from Tehran, no acknowledgement from the Pentagon, just silence and movement. Because while the world is waiting for answers, military activity in the region is intensifying. U.S. destroyers have reportedly shifted into tighter formations. Air patrols have increased, and Iranian coastal defenses are now on heightened alert status. This is not de-escalation. This is preparation. Stay with me, because what comes next will shock you. Because in the middle of all this, buried beneath the headlines, there's one detail that hasn't been fully revealed yet. A detail that could explain why that Iranian vessel was really in that position and what it may have been carrying. And if that information is confirmed, it doesn't just justify the strike, it could completely change how this conflict unfolds from this point forward. Before we get into that, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and notifications are turned on, because we're tracking this story in real time, and what happens next could develop within hours, not days. You don't want to miss the next update. Now, and let's get into the part they're not telling you publicly, because what was actually on that ship might be the most dangerous detail of all. Now, we get to the part that changes everything, because according to multiple insider sources and confidential informants with direct access to regional intelligence briefings, the Iranian vessel that was allegedly destroyed was not just coordinating patrol movements, it may have been carrying something far more dangerous. and therefore censure in der or deren in der ender in the mober in der enter enter ender in yo and ship missile system configured for rapid deployment. Let that sink in. This wasn't just a command vessel. It may have been a floating launch platform. And if that's true, it explains why U.S. forces were tracking it so closely for over 72 hours, and why the decision to strike may have been made in a matter of seconds. But here's where it gets even more intense. At approximately 03:10 local time, just 30 minutes after the reported torpedo impact, signals intelligence units picked up a sudden surge in Iranian military communications. Not public statements. Sir, not official responses. Internal chatter. Encrypted high-frequency transmissions moving between Bandar Abbas, Keshem Island, and multiple IRGC command nodes. That's not confusion. That's activation. I need you to understand how serious this is, because when military communication spikes like that, it usually means one thing: response planning is already underway. And then something unexpected happened. Instead of immediately announcing the loss of a vessel, Iran went completely silent. No confirmation. No denial, no footage, and no retaliation, just silence. Now, in normal situations, that might suggest uncertainty. But according to defense analysts, silence at this level can also mean something else: strategic delay. A pause designed to assess damage, reposition assets, and choose the most effective form of retaliation. And here's the twist that no one saw coming. Satellite imagery reviewed by independent analysts around 05:20 local time shows what appears to be debris patterns spreading across a 2.3 nautical mile radius, consistent with a high-impact underwater detonation. But more importantly, there are indications that a second vessel may have been operating in close proximity at the time of the strike, and that vessel is now unaccounted for. Let me say that again. There may have been a second Iranian vessel involved, and it has disappeared from all tracking systems. That changes the entire situation, because now we're not just looking at a single strike. We could be looking at a multi-layered operation, one that either went wrong for Iran or one that is still unfolding in ways we haven't seen yet. But wait, what happened next will shock you. Within hours of these developments, global reactions began pouring in. British naval officials reportedly elevated threat levels for their ships operating in the Gulf. French reconnaissance assets increased surveillance flights. And according to confidential informants, at least one NATO intelligence unit issued an internal alert warning of a potential escalation window over the next 24 to 48 hours. Even more telling, commercial shipping insurers began revising risk assessments for vessels passing near the Strait of Hormuz, with premiums spiking almost instantly. That's not based on rumors. That's based on real-time threat evaluation. And then came the most unexpected response of all. A senior Iranian military figure, speaking off record to regional media, allegedly described the incident as a controlled situation, refusing to confirm any losses, but warning that responses will not be immediate, but they will be decisive. That's not denial. That's a warning. And here's where the pattern breaks, because instead of immediate retaliation, Iran appears to be repositioning. Coastal missile systems have reportedly shifted to higher readiness levels. Drone activity has expanded beyond typical patrol zones. And naval units are no longer clustering near Bandar Abbas, they're dispersing. That's a tactical move. That's preparation for something larger. I need you to understand how serious this is, because when forces disperse like that, it often means they're preparing for multiple engagement scenarios, not just one. And remember that second vessel? The one that disappeared? Some analysts now believe it may have been carrying additional equipment or personnel linked to a larger operation, possibly even coordinating with other assets in the region. If that's true, then the strike at 0240 wasn't the end of something. It was the interruption of something much bigger. Stay with me, because this next part changes everything. Because while the world is focused on whether a single warship was destroyed, the real story might be what didn't get destroyed and what could still be in motion right now. And if that second vessel is still out there, untracked, undetected, and operational, then the most dangerous phase of this crisis may not have happened yet. But the worst part, that comes next. Now we're at the point where everything changes, because what happens next will determine whether this incident remains a shadow conflict or explodes into something far bigger, something that could reshape the entire region. Right now, as of April 15th, 2026, we are in a narrow window, a moment where both sides are calculating, repositioning, and waiting. And when you look at the patterns, the silence from Tehran, the movement of U.S. assets, the disappearance of that second vessel, it becomes clear that this situation is far from over. So let's break down what could happen next. The first scenario is the most immediate. Enter terror and territory-controlled retaliation. In this case, Iran responds, but not in a way that triggers full-scale war. That could mean a targeted strike against a U.S. naval asset using drones or anti-ship missiles. It could mean a coordinated swarm attack in the Strait of Hormuz designed to send a message without escalating beyond control. Insider sources suggest that Iran has rehearsed these kinds of responses for years, fast, precise, and deniable. But here's the danger. Even a limited strike could spiral out of control in seconds. One miscalculation, one overreaction, and suddenly both sides are pulled into direct confrontation. The second scenario is more strategic, delayed escalation. This is where things get more unpredictable. Iran stays silent publicly, continues repositioning its forces, and waits. Days, maybe even weeks. Then, without warning, it strikes in a way that catches everyone off guard. Not necessarily in the Strait of Hormuz, but but somewhere unexpected. A U.S. base in the region, a naval convoy. Even cyber or asymmetric attacks that disrupt operations without direct attribution. This is the kind of response that military analysts fear the most, because you don't see it coming until it's already happening. And then there's the third scenario, the one sentence and first scenario, and the narrower scenario, the one that changes everything. Full-scale escalation. If Iran confirms that one of its warships was destroyed by a U.S. submarine, and especially if that vessel was carrying strategic military systems, the pressure to respond decisively becomes overwhelming. Not just internally, but across the region. Allied groups, proxy forces, and aligned militias could be activated. Multiple fronts could open at once. And at that point, this is no longer a localized conflict. This becomes a regional war. I need you to understand how serious this is, because the Strait of Hormuz is not just another waterway. It's one of the most critical energy corridors in the world. Nearly 20% of global oil supply passes through that narrow stretch of water. If conflict erupts there, the impact won't stay contained. It will ripple outwards, and affecting economies, security, and stability far beyond the Middle East. But here's the part that should stay with you. This entire situation may have started with a decision made in seconds. A submarine commander interpreting a signal, assessing a threat, and launching a torpedo. One action, one moment, and now the consequences are unfolding in real time. And we still don't know the full picture. We don't know exactly what that Iranian vessel was carrying. We don't know where the second vessel is. And we don't know how Iran will choose to respond. But we do know this: something has shifted. The rules have changed. The threshold has moved, and both sides are now operating in a space where the margin for error is almost zero. Stay with this story, because the next 24 to 48 hours could be critical. If Iran breaks its silence, everything changes. If that second vessel reappears, everything changes. If another strike happens from either side, everything changes. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Iran will retaliate immediately, or is something bigger being planned behind the scenes? Drop your answer in the comments below, because your perspective matters and this conversation is just getting started. And if you want real-time updates, insider-level analysis, and breaking developments as they happen, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because in a situation like this, timing is everything, and you don't want to be the last to know. This is a moment the world will remember, and we are watching it unfold right now.